right, thanks. Thanks for joining us this evening, afternoon. As most of you know me, but I'm Jerry Burton. I'm the president of Nevada Now. And we'd like to start off by introducing our board members. I think we're all here today. Our executive vice president is Tricia Methner. I believe she's on, but I think she's driving. Our vice president outreach is Eva Love, that you just met. Vice President Media is Madalena Robertson. She handles the website, makes our graphics, just, puts up with my many changes. She's wonderful. Vice President, so Sue wears a lot of hats, so be ready. Legislative Action, Nevada Now PAC Treasurer, and she's the chair of our legislative committee. She'll be giving us an update on the bills that we're supporting today. And then Lenoring Briley is our Nevada Now treasurer, long time, and puts up with all my emails with things we're getting donations and spending money. And our new secretary, Michelle Maese, she's been wonderful helping us with programs and getting to know more people in the community. And then today she'll be one of our speakers, so that's exciting. So Madalena's going to put some things in the chat, how to join Nevada Now. We're all volunteer. Becoming a member helps to support our work. You can also join our legislative committee. We have about 25 people right now on the committee, helping off and on. It's all volunteer work to keep track of the bills and testify and write opinions. And so we've been really busy with that and will be throughout the rest of the session. And we support feminist legislation. We work in coalition with progressive groups in the Valley, in Nevada, all around Nevada. And you can look on our website and see the type of bills that we're supporting and how you could give an opinion, view committee meetings. We've got a lot of information about Nellis on the website as well. So most of us have been working on that. And our next program is May 23rd. We'll be talking about immigration rights, DACA, immigration policy. We have Assemblywoman Selena Torres coming, Natalia Jordan, Jocelyn, I want to say it wrong, Cuevas, Maria Nieto Orta. They're both from Mi Familia Boda, which is another great organization that we've worked with. So we're looking forward to seeing you next Sunday at 4 as well. And I think, Sue, could you give us the legislative update before we start the program?
Yeah, it's gonna be real short, real short. There was a major booing this week when the bill to abolish the death penalty died. So yeah, I know. The good news is AB 286, the ghost gun bill, that got out of committee, so look for that to be voted on in the Senate this week because the deadline's next Friday. Nicole Canizaro's bill, SB 190, for pharmacists to provide contraceptives, that went through committee, so that should be voted on this week. The bill to seal evictions, that got out of committee, and the changing the requirements on health care for homeless youth, that got out of committee. So a lot of good things did happen. We're waiting to see what's happening with our favorite bill, the period equity. But my understanding is from Carson City is that we're waiting for the education budget to get figured out before that one, the AB 224, can be voted on. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed and just be aware of any hearings and testimony that needs to be done this week. There weren't that many meetings scheduled, so hopefully things will move pretty quickly by next Friday.
I bet it's going to be busy this week, so it will be.
Whew.
Yeah. I think it was last Monday. I was like, I don't have much to do today, and then I think I was on Zoom and everything else all day that day because bills kept popping up. So, and we were helping Senator Spearman on a couple bills, and when Senator Spearman calls, you hop in the shower and be ready to testify as soon as you can. So and
her bill, the one I think SB 186 that you testified on, that did get out of committee. So yeah, no, that's great. Testifying and being there and giving your opinion, it does help. It does work. So That's where we're at. We could still use some more pushing on the ghost gun bill. So
yeah, we testified for that one as well. So some good news, and some we know is not good news, but that's how it goes. And then we don't know if there'll be a special session to spend the money that we know we have coming. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. So that's where we are on that. And we will start the program. I thought I'd start off Michelle, because Michelle's going to help introduce our wonderful speakers. As Michelle mentioned earlier, May is National Foster Care Month. And I wanted to start off by just a piece of, I'm going to have Madalena put in the chat the proclamation that President Biden had for National Foster Care Month. But this one paragraph really I thought would be a way to start off our program. He said, every child deserves to grow up in a supportive, loving home where they can thrive and prosper. During these unfortunate times when children cannot remain safely in their own homes, the individuals and families who open up their hearts and homes to foster children provide a vital service to their communities. During this National Foster Care Month, we share our gratitude for those who support youth and families by being a resource to children in need and supporting birth parents so that they may safely reunite with their families whenever possible. We also recognize that it takes collaboration and community effort from local organizations to federal agencies to support children, birth parents, and resource and kin families during challenging times. So today, we're going to learn about foster care in Nevada and how we can support children in the organizations who help children in our state's care. And we're joined by some of these wonderful women who are working in our community every day to help Nevada children. And Michelle Maese is going to be introducing our speakers, and she's one of our speakers as well. So thank you, Michelle.
That was wonderful, Jerry. Thank you so much. We appreciate
a good start.
Yeah, that was an awesome start. I was like, oh my gosh, that's wonderful. Yeah, so we appreciate, we believe, and we support everything that was just said. So welcome, and thank everybody for joining us today. The first speaker is going to be Miss Giovanni Henderson, and Giovanni works for the Department of Family Services, and she is in the training department, and she is going to talk about training our SIPS model, and that's our she'll go into all of that. So go ahead, Giovanni. I will mute myself.
Hi, thank you all so much for having me today. So at the Department of Family Services, I am part of one of two training teams. And when we get new people into the Department of Family Services, they go through what's called an academy. And in the academy, there are normally about 23 to about 24 people, but it's been as large as about 50 people. But just like in the recent months, due to the pandemic, we've had about half that. And in the academy, which goes for about 10 weeks, new employees are learning the model, which is called SIPS, that we use for our safety model. It's pretty much the same thing across the state of Nevada. Here in Southern Nevada, we call it SIPS. In Northern Nevada, in the rurals, they call it SAFE. And what happens is when they go through the academy, they are learning the model, they're learning how to stick. They're learning how to stick to fidelity of the model, and they're learning coaching, and they're learning what the relationship between a supervisor and the worker should be. So usually when people come from the academy, they'll go into NIA or Permanency, which you'll hear more about later on. What we do on training team A, which is the training team training team B, that's what training team A does. It's the academy. Training team B, which is the training team that I'm on, we do ongoing trainings for workers who've already finished academy and are needing reinforced skills in our safety model, and as well as staff that are throughout the state of Nevada. We all have mandatory trainings that we have to do quarterly. So our team is the team that takes care of those trainings. Our safety model is what pretty much drives our agency. It's what we use to determine whether or not we are going to service families. The Department of Family Services only services unsafe children. So in order to identify whether or not a family has a child that is unsafe, we use the SIPS model. And That stands for Safety Intervention Permanency System. And it starts with the intake. There are a total of 4 assessments. So it's the intake assessment, the Nevada Initial Assessment, which is NIA, which you'll hear more about. And then there's the PCFA and the PCPA. So those 4 assessments are basically what we use to determine whether or not we will remain involved in a family's life. SIPs, besides identifying unsafe children, it enhances caregiver protective capacities and restores the caregivers to their protective responsibilities. It creates safe homes for families and achieves child permanency by restoring caregivers back to their protective role. We do quarterly trainings for things such as domestic violence. We also do quarterly trainings where we incorporate SIPs as well. So everything that we do in the training team, really, we always incorporate our safety model and how to use our safety model to fidelity, because that's what our goal is. And both training teams are what are called purveyors. So we can go out to each of the different sites, which you'll hear more about in a bit, and work with the different units in ensuring that they are able to work through cases in a way that is meeting the requirements of our federal guidelines, our state guidelines. We're also ensuring that workers feel supported, supervisors feel supported, managers feel supported. And one of the most interesting things about Training Team B is that we're all former people who either were caseworkers in either NIA or permanency or in intake. And so we're not so far removed that we're disconnected from what's going on in the field. And that gives us a really unique perspective on how to best serve caseworkers who are still in the field, as well as supervisors and managers. Our safety model is really designed to keep children in their home of origin, if it is at all possible to do so safely. And if it is not, then we are working extremely hard to reunify children with their parents. And there's a difference between reunifying with an in-home safety plan and closing a case. So the wonderful thing about SIPs is that it allows us to reunify children, even if their parents are still working a case plan. So children are not in out-of-home care for longer than is absolutely needed. And that's one of the great things about SIPs, is that it's not based on whether or not an individual caseworker feels, a family is ready to bring their children back into the home, but it's based on this safety model where we're doing these assessments, and it's really a family-centered, strength-based model that incorporates a trauma-focused approach, very family-centered. We're using evidence-based practices that are incorporated in our safety model. And it's actually, it's made a huge difference, because this is really based on behavioral change and not just compliance. So we're working as partners with families versus in authority type roles. So this is definitely not foster care of old days where you had to check off a bunch of boxes. We're really working in partnership with families to help increase their caregiver protective capacities so that they not only are able to have their cases closed, but that they're not coming back into the system. And we're linking them with community agencies that can continue to support them when the Department of Family Services is no longer involved.
Thank you so much, Giovanni. We appreciate it. And we can do all questions at the end too, just so we can move through everybody, but we appreciate it. Thank you so much, Giovanni. Our next speaker is going to be the fabulous Robin Franklin from Jamaica. She is currently joining us from her vacation. We already saw the view out the window. It's fantastic. We are living through her. And Robin is in our NIA unit. And NIA, just so everybody knows, NIA is what we used to call CPS. Okay, so anyone who says they're in NIA, that means that they're a CPS investigator. There's different stages of our department, but CPS is now referred to NIA. So Robin's going to talk about that and the intake department. Like when you call the hotline, what happens thereafter? So we'll start with Robin and then I will finish. Okay, thanks, Robin. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, ladies. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate, Nevada Now having me part of your group and just being able to speak to you about something that I truly love. I love child welfare. I've been doing this almost 16 years in December. So you can tell that I really love it because you have to be a little bit crazy to stay as long as we do, okay? But just to tell you, like, we are not just a force driven into ourselves. We definitely have different, like Giovanni said, statutes and laws that drive what we do. So we are governed by the Nevada Revised Statute 432B. We also are governed by the Nevada Administrative Code 432, as well as the DCFS, that's the Department of Child and Family Services. And also federally, we also have a federal umbrella, and the most used one that we typically that we adhere to is the ASPA, and that basically is the Adoption and Safe Families Act. That was in 1997. So, no, was it 1997? I believe so. I could be wrong.
I was going to go over it. Yes.
So 1997. So, and we also have another one that is very much pushed by us is the ICWA, and that is the Indian Child Welfare Act. That's just to make sure that our Native Americans they have active efforts that's towards giving their children back, that their children are not placed with non-Native American people or adopted by non-Native American people, that, we really go the extra mile to ensure that kids are dealt with differently. Now, we do have an intake typically when people have a concern about a child or a family, they call into our hotline. And just for people's reference, I'll put the number in the chat just so that you know, but the number is 702-399-0081. Typically, we have mandated reporters that are calling these in. This is our teachers, our medical staff, our mental health professionals, me, myself, daycare workers, and our first responders. Funny enough, we are not first responders. We're not considered first responders, us child welfare workers, even though we're on every scene of every disaster, of anything that happens with parents or anything else like that. But for some reason, we're not considered first responders. I think that that's a real travesty because we are there, and we are there providing services to families at every disaster, every problem, anytime that we have parents who are domestic violence, where one parent shoots another parent, we're there. Just with the police officers, just with the paramedics. When a child is hurt by, basically homicide, we're there. Those police officers are waiting for our judgment before they even do anything. So we are extremely important in this community, and I don't think that we get the props that we should. That's my own little thing. But just to give you a little bit of context. So last month, I just took the stats from last month, but this is like, if you look at it a year, it's crazy. For our intake staff with our community line, we received over 2,316 calls last month for the month of April. Out of that, and then we also received an additional 1,685 for our emergency line. That basically is those people from the physicians, our police officers, firefighters who've had concerns and they call into our back line. That's basically what we call our back line to say that we've had issues or there's something that's going on in the community. Year to date, we've received 8,278, and that's for our community line, and 6,209 for our emergency line. Typically, when they get the call, sometimes they do not result in an investigation or even a referral. So we have received out of that, that large number, they made 2,585 into investigation. Well, as a referral, they actually documented that they received the call and that they have taken notice of the information. Out of that, 1,300 were investigations, and that's my department. Once we receive a referral, it's actually, turned into or moved to certain zones. And we have about 5 zones within the Las Vegas area. We have North that does like our North Las Vegas, so 890, it goes by zip code. So 89030, 8903231, that. So, and that's typically just our North Las Vegas. 89115 is also considered North. We also have our East, which is typically Flamingo, Tropicana-ish area. We have our south, which is way deep in Henderson, Green Valley. We have our west, which is typically in Summerlin area and that place. And then we have central, which is our central Las Vegas. So we would probably consider like the old West Las Vegas if anybody's ever lived here long enough. And they said it was West Las Vegas, like right smack dab in the middle. Also dealing with the casinos, downtown area. So 89106. We also have two specialized units, and those specialized units, they both have been trained in their different parameters. So we have what's called 4 and under. That's typically for a child that has been harmed, that is under the age of 4 years old. It also is for near or fatality to deal with the child. So it could be at any age if they had a near fatality or if they actually were killed by their parent or caregiver, they are sent to our specialized unit. Those people are specifically trained in forensic interviewing, they deal mostly with our police force, our medical staff, and finding out what that abuse was. And then we have our sex abuse unit. And they typically deal with any child that's been sexually assaulted, molested, or at sexual risk by a perpetrator, or I should say, by a person who might have committed that, a caregiver or a parent. And they also, too, are forensically interviewed. We do have a special unit within our agency. It's at the Child Advocacy Center. We call it the CAC, where they're interviewed by special individuals to get the information from the children. And they work closely with law enforcement to ensure that they get, the accurate information, where they prosecute and gather that information and evidence to put forward for criminal proceedings. That's also with the 4 and under unit. So once we have that, they've divvied them out to what zone that they need to be at. They do have to tell us what priority they are. Typically, we do have 3 priorities for investigations. The first one is a priority 1. That means that we have 6 hours to get to the scene of where this child has been in danger or is in danger, or it's called present danger. So that child is at high risk of being hurt or has been hurt. So we have 6 hours. Prior to COVID, it was only 3 hours. So we had 3 hours to respond to the location of where that child is. Then we have what's called a P2, and that's our priority 2 response, which basically means that something has been happening, it's been ongoing, whether it's drug abuse or that they're finding a child outside every day and nobody, somebody's called us in. So they say that this child is always in a state of danger. So a worker has 24 hours to get to that home to assess whether or not that child is in danger. And then finally, we have what is called our priority 3, which there is typically some maltreatment like educational neglect, or the child has been maybe kicked out of the home, something that's like very just maltreatment, like inadequate food, where we probably wouldn't go out there. It might be 2-3 days. We typically go out there within 24 hours, just so y'all know. Most investigations, we go out there. But we do have up to 72 hours to make contact with that family. Typically with our assessments, or when they've identified a need for the family, what I've seen most of, and being a NIA supervisor, is for inadequate supervision, where, parents are leaving the children at home when they've had to go to work, or that child is out wandering without a parent. Physical risk typically deals with our drug use parents, our parents who are, consistently doing drugs, or domestic violence. I see that that is our typical thing that we see. And then we have environmental neglect. Just think of hoarders. It's just nasty homes, people just, they keep nasty homes, and it's out there, y'all. I'm not even, the stories I could tell. Educational neglect, where we have significant maltreatment with that, where a child has a lot of absences. Parents have been notified by the school to let them know that, your child is missing school. They've called out the truancy, so they do those things. We also have bruises and cuts when we have inappropriate disciplining for parents when they're using objects such as extension cords, belts, leaving welds, open skin, they'll start punching them, things that are just out of the norm, and also inadequate shelter. Now that, since COVID, has been really big for us because people are getting evicted. People are losing their homes. So that has been one of the bigger things that we've seen since COVID has happened. So like Giovanni said, we use our safety intervention permanency system, which we refer to as SIPS here in Las Vegas. it is the least intrusive way that we try to get to know these families and learn their story so that we can help them if we do have to make the decision of taking their children and removing them from that doing. Protective capacity. We are using our.
Let's see if she'd come back. Robin, we're losing you a little.
To remove the children. Now, mind you, kids are basically parents' property. They're right. Those are their children. So we are governed by the courts to ensure that we are making the most appropriate decision possible to remove the children. We can remove them by exigent circumstances, meaning that if the child stayed in this situation, they could die. We can remove them by warrant and having the judge say that, yes, these children do need to come out. Or we can do voluntary, where we can, talk to the parents and they can say, you know what, I can't take my child. If you could take them, for me. Or we work in home, so we would do some other things, and Michelle explained that to you better. But that is basically what NIA does. Is we get the information, we try to identify the strengths and the needs of the family, and we move them on to wherever they need to go. And that would be Michelle.
Great job, Robin. Thank you so much. That was awesome. I always learn something from you and Devani when we have a conversation. So I appreciate your dedication to our babies. I mean, I really do. I know how hard this job is. So I appreciate both of you. Thank you so much. So I'm Michelle Mayese. I have been with the Department of Family Services for 15 years, and I really love child welfare. I work in those specialized units that Robin was talking about. I work with children who have been abused, neglected, who are between the ages of 0 and 5 okay, we'll get questions at the end, absolutely. I work and specialized with kids from 0 to 5 for physical abuse, and then 0 to 18 for sexual abuse. So like Robin talked about, there are zones. The zone cases take cases that are usually domestic violence, substance abuse, a little bit of neglect. Our specialized units, there are 4 specialized units in the state. I'm one of 4. And 2 CPS for sex abuse, 2 CPS for physical abuse. I work with child fatality, near fatality, and let me give you an example. So near fatality would be possibly lack of supervision, baby walks outside or gets through the most typical is the doggy door. I need you to know that if you are babysitting a child, put down the doggy door latch, because when the kids get out and it is the summer months and they walk through that door and they are in that pool, that is a near fatality because they have drowned, but they haven't passed away. And so that's a near fatality. Those are the cases that I specialize in. I also specialize in child fatality where, example, and again, if anybody is uncomfortable, let me just preface this. We've been doing child welfare for 15 years, so we are very used to talking about things like this. If anyone is uncomfortable, please feel free to jump off. If you want to have a side conversation later, that's okay too, because this is a very sensitive topic, especially, all of us on here together. So I just want to say that because my unit is very specific to child death and child sexual abuse. Okay, so if anybody needs to jump off, I completely understand. Okay, give it a second. Okay, so when it comes to child fatality, any case, here's what I'll say, because we can't disclose information. Within the last week, any case you see on the news where a child has died, that case comes to me. So think about that in the last week. Okay. So I've been a specialized supervisor for about 7 years. So in all that time, any child who has died or a mother who has allowed the boyfriend to babysit and the child dies, for example, if the mother has more children, that case comes to my unit. And that's with child fatality, even the near fatalities. Now, if we do have a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old who has been severely neglected to the point of where they're malnourished and 40 pounds, which we have had some 16 or 17-year-olds, 40 pounds, we also get those because those are considered specialized. Sometimes we find out in the end, it's a medical reason, a medical condition, or sometimes parents, have starved their children to death or nearly to death. We get those too. And again, I only deal with child fatality and sex abuse. A lot of our sexual abuse cases, because we have 0 to 18 are children who have been sexually abused, and the parents, regardless if it's the mother or the father, decides to stay in the relationship with the alleged perpetrator. And we have the case in our unit. We get those cases also. And so we work with the parents to, really increase their protective capacity around what happened, what can you do differently, and how can you keep your children safe. Like Giovanni and Robin both said, our goal is reunification always, and then we work from there. Let me give you an example of a safe child. Is what we were taught in our academy is, if I walk into a home, this is safe. I walk into a home and I see people drunk, passed out, needles all over the floor, and I take my baby and I leave, I'm a safe parent because I have increased protective capacity over my child to say, we are not staying here, we are leaving. That is a safe parent. An unsafe parent is one who sees needles on the floor, broken glass, chaos in the home, puts the baby down and engages in drugs. That's an unsafe parent because they're not using the skills that they would need to be protective over their child to leave the situation. Okay, so I just want to give you those kind of clear examples. Those are pretty extreme, but those are some pretty good examples that I always keep in the back of my mind. So again, I deal with the specialized. We have medically fragile children that also come into our care where parents are not able to, and maybe it's cognitively, if their children have been born with some medical defects and their children have to have G-tubes, whereas the parents aren't able to change them or don't change them because of maybe substance abuse. Because a lot of times the abuse is because of this, the abuse happened, or because of this, the neglect happened. So because I might have some cognitive delays and I don't understand how to feed my baby, the neglect happened. Because I'm on drugs and I left my boyfriend with my baby, then the abuse happened. So it's always a symptom of. So we try to get to the root of where that symptom came from, and then we try to work from there. When we get parents, yes. When we get children passed on from Robin's unit doesn't actually give me cases, but just an example of when we get cases passed on from Robin's unit, we start either an out-of-home case or an in-home case. Out-of-home cases, right now we have 3,316 kids as of yesterday in our out-of-home care. So I just want to go over some other statistics with you that I pulled up today. So currently we have 52 children at Child Haven. We have 19 children in detention. So that's on our juvenile justice system. So we work very closely with JJ. We have 114 kids placed with licensed fictive kin. That means a family friend who knows me really well. I know that Vicki and Haley will go over that. And then they're licensed, like as a regular care provider. We have 527 kids in regular foster care with licensed homes. We have 62 kids in the hospital. That could mean Desert Willow, Spring Mountain, those are like psychiatric hospitals. We have 76 children with ICPC, the Interstate Compact for the Placement of Children. Let's just say that Robin's child comes into care. Robin says, listen, my Aunt Sue, she lives in New Hampshire, and she said she can take my daughter. Can you get my Aunt Sue, my daughter? And we say, absolutely, we can, Robin. Hold on, let us put some court papers together. It's called an ICPC packet. We will contact that state, send the information over, and then that state takes a long time. It takes about 6 months. We pray for 6 months. They take about 6 months. Sometimes it's a year for California. I will not judge, just make an assessment. Sometimes it takes a year, but they will say yes, and then they can take the baby to California in that home with that relative and keep the baby until we find a permanency for that baby. So there is hope, because we absolutely, our first goal is to place children with families, period. Okay, whether that's mom and dad, a fictive kin that you know your neighbor has known your child forever, that's our goal, because children need to be with somebody they know. It's very difficult to be with someone you don't know. It's like walking into a new job and knowing no one, or sitting at this lunch table by yourself. It's uncomfortable, and they're babies. We also have 74 children on Runaway. It's unfortunate, but we do get a lot of teen runaways from as young as, I'd say, 12 to 18. They don't want to be in our care. We get it. They want to go home. Sometimes parents help them. Sometimes parents call us and say, come and get your kid, because they don't want to get in trouble. And so we do right now have 74 kids on run. We do have 240 kids who are on voluntary jurisdiction. What that means is that there's a law right now, but what that means is that after the age of 18, they can voluntarily stay in foster care until they're 21 to get help. because we know that when most of our teens age out, it's unfortunate, but some of them end up on the streets. Some of them end up with no homes. We don't want that to happen to any child ever. So what we do is we have AB 350 and the independent living program that helps with rental assistance. It helps with chafee funds. It helps to keep the kids, off the streets. They get college education if they've been in child haven. They get books, they get food. So there's a lot of programs for our kids after the age of 18, but they have to voluntarily want it. That's the caveat. So if they say, we can't stand it, we've been in foster care our whole lives, we're out of here, which most kids do because they want to be free at 18, but they do have the option to stay in care, which is really good. A lot of our kids do, and they're very successful. We have one who is actually going to be running for state assembly. We have, some really good success stories also. So those are just some numbers I wanted to give you. Right now, the length of stay at Child Haven campus is about 9 to 17 days. And they're at the Child Haven campus, which is right next to the courthouse downtown. There are 4 cottages, and it's Agassiz, Beezer, Howard, and Newark, and they all have kids of different ages. We have sibling cottages, cottages 0 to 5, 5 to 10, and then our teen cottage, and then boys and girls separated. When kids come in, we want them to be home with mom, so again, or dad. We do in-home cases. That means that we will put services like, it's called Safe at Home. We'll put somebody in the house with the parents if the case came in for the parents not feeding their children and the child has diabetes and the parents just giving the kids carbs and sugar, we'll put somebody in there to say, okay, hey, this is what you need to do. This is when you need to feed your baby. This is what you need to feed your baby. We'll put that person in the home 7 days a week. That's called Safe at Home services. That way the baby can stay home. We have out-of-home care right now. Again, 3,000 kids out of home. In the month of April, we finalized 40 adoptions. Last year, from January 1st to December 31st, we finalized 504 adoptions in 1 year. Some people will say that's great. Robin and I look at it like, what could we have done differently? And how could we have helped them get home with their families? Okay, that's how we as workers and supervisors, my workers love it when kids get adopted, but they always say, but what could I have done? And I tell them, you know what, we did the best that we could, and the kids are, okay where they're at, and we have some amazing foster parents. In the month of April, last month, we closed 201 cases, and that by means of, I'll give you other reasons. Reunification, they close by when the kids go home. Adoption is when they get adopted by either relative or foster parent. APLA is other permanent plan living arrangements. That's our kids ages 16 and up, or guardianship. A lot of times we have cases that come in that are not too serious, and we are like, you know what, this little girl has been with grandma since day one. Grandma's raised this little girl. We don't need to get involved. Let's just do a guardianship so we can close our case. Because believe me, we don't want to be in families' lives more than they want to be in our lives. So we do guardianship. Robin was talking about the Adoption Safe Families Act that was signed into law by Bill Clinton on November 19th, 1997. So after having been approved by Congress earlier in that month, it was a fundamental change for foster care. What that did was it really worked on the emphasis of if a child is in foster care for 22 months, but out of their home for 15, you have to move towards termination of parental rights and adoption. That changed the trajectory of foster care because a lot of kids were languishing in care. They were just waiting for their parents to get well, and parents weren't getting well. And, around that time in the 90s, parents just weren't getting well. So they made that change. The only reason you could keep kids in care longer is if you had compelling reasons. Like if I said, Judge, mom just got out of jail. She's been in jail for 13 of those 15 months. And it was the child was in dad's care. Mom just got out of jail and she wants to work her case plan. And the judge would say yes. And that happens a lot of times because often in our cases, one parent is in jail and wasn't able to protect at that time. It's unfortunate. We've had some parents in jail for traffic tickets and their child gets abused and then they get out and then we're like, oh my gosh, thank goodness you're here. So that would be a compelling reason to ask the judge to extend the care for the child. ICWA, we make so many reasonable efforts for children to remain in Native American homes, let me tell you. We work with every tribe. We have an ICWA unit that contacts the tribe. We have court dates with the tribe. They have their own court dates and their tribe, but we have a law that says we have to place with a Native American family and we have to adopt with a Native American family if the child has any Native American blood. And they have to be registered in order for us to do so. When kids are sent home with their parents, we monitor the case for about 3 to 6 months. And like Giovanni said, it's not about checking off a box to say, I'm not going to let him in the house anymore or her in the house anymore. He beat me up. He beat up my baby. I'm just not going to do it. It's going to have to be some really, really tough conversations to be like, what happened? We get into really explicit detail about what could have been different. We get into their childhood, about what they were abused. If they were abused, I'm going to tell you about 85% of our family, of our parents have been abused also. They are products of the system too. It's very cyclical. We talk to them about how they can be the change for their kids and how they can stop this from happening. We ask them, how would you feel if your grandbaby was in foster care? And they're like, oh, it would never happen. And we're like, but it is happening. We had your mom. And so we really talk about that cycle of change and abuse. A lot of our families go through therapy and services. And then once they're home, we continue to monitor the case for 3 to 6 months. And then we close the case out. I will tell you that our rate of recidivism is about 26%. Sometimes parents come back into care. It's sad. We have some awesome foster parents who will take the kids back after they come back, but some, it's very hard for them. After we close cases, again, we have the voluntary jurisdiction and, the AB 350, which allows kids to stay in foster care past the age of 18. I also want to talk about what Robin was talking about being essential workers. But first, let me say, in the 80th session, because we are first responders and we know that in our hearts, the Department of Labor actually determined us to be essential workers for the COVID crisis. That's it. Okay. They actually gave us the honor to have, the name so that we could work telework and that we could, because we didn't shut down. Kids still got abused. We were still in homes. We didn't have the opportunity to not work anymore because we couldn't. And so we were given the title of essential workers at that time. I will say that once school stopped, when school went virtual, we didn't get as many cases. When school went back, our cases doubled because that was the first time we saw kids from here down. That was the first time kids were in classrooms from here down. And, as Rob can tell you, the calls were, I don't even know how we survived those months. I don't know how the babies survived those months. It was horrific. Jerry knows because I would text Jerry and say, I'm sorry, I'm working. I can't, I'm sorry, I'm working. And that was literally, poor Jerry, that was literally for at least 2 months, Jerry, I think. It was really, really tough for the babies and our workers. Right now, it's pretty calm. AB 362, I worked on last legislative session with Assemblyman Fumo. Our workers are in homes every single day. We are the only lifeline to these babies. When we get a case, we keep the case for 2 years. That's about what we keep the case for. We have 7 court dates. From start to finish, it's about 7 court dates. Our workers have gotten attacked. I was physically attacked by a 6'5" man who I was trying to remove his son, jumped on me, hit me. We have really endured some horrific things, but we will do it for children every single day. But because of that, we were not given the privilege of having our addresses and names and phone numbers not listed. So any parent could look us up if you owned a home. Now, police officers, firefighters, judges, court clerks, DAs, if they dealt with domestic violence and physical abuse, had those privileges within that law. So I said, that's not okay. So myself and I led about 15 other workers. We testified at the legislature and we got ourselves put into that bill, 1,000 of us from Clark County as well as Washoe County. And we petitioned and said we are just as at risk for something to happen to our families. We've had parents, post our pictures on Instagram and Facebook and our home addresses and people shown up. So I was very happy that we were able to get that passed as well. And so we really work hard for our children and our families. We hope our families recover, but we need more foster parents. We need more Casa workers because without them, our children stay at Child Haven campus and they should not. So I will turn it over to Haley, who is going to talk about foster care.
Thank you. I'm going to try and my screen, so you guys let me know if this works. what do we got here? Let's see.
We can see it. Looks good.
Okay, so you can see the whole thing. Oh wait, let me go
Well,
away.
it says zoom to the right on mine, so
Here,
there you go.
okay, I think that's working. Let's go with it. Okay, so just so you all know me, I'm Haley Watson. I'm with the, obviously, Department of Family Services, but I'm with the recruitment team. So I am virtually out in the community within this last year, trying to get more families to step up and become foster families. My husband and I became foster family, let's see, 3 years ago now. So I'm doing it at work and at home, and we have since adopted 2 children, but the work doesn't stop there. So I will get going. Just a little bit about foster care. I mean, foster care is about believing and investing in the future of all of our children and their biological families. We've talked a lot about that today. Our program is designed to have temporary care for our kids. That's our main goal, is to be able to get kids back with their biological families or relatives or kinship families, fictive kinship families. We've talked about that, how much better our kids do when they're able to be with that family unit when it's a healthy situation. So that is our goal. Our primary goal is safe reunification. Obviously, if safe reunification is not possible, yes, adoption is beautiful and wonderful, but we hope that what we can provide for our biological or kinship families will be enough for them to be able to reunify. So we focus on that when we're talking about foster families stepping up to say yes in a temporary manner. We talked a little bit about the numbers just a minute ago, but in Nevada, there's about 5,000 children. Here in Clark County, there's anywhere between 3,000 and 3,500 kids. And that is spread, in different areas, which we just learned. But in any of those situations, if a family, a kinship family, has stepped up and they're not able to provide care for those children could be placed in regular foster care. And so we need enough families to always be ready to say yes. And right now we have less than 500 families at any given time ready to say, we're ready, we're licensed. And we want to be able to have more families waiting to say, our home is ready, we're licensed, versus kids waiting at Child Haven. And we don't always have that in that situation right now. Nationally, reunification rates are at about a little bit over half. So of all the children in the United States that enter foster care, a little more than half will be able to return home. Here in Clark County, and anyone can jump in and correct me, these numbers might be a little bit older. It's about 70%. It may be a little bit higher now, but that's really good. That is showing that what we're doing is helping families to heal and get to a place where reunification is possible. And when we talk about that with families, they're surprised by that a lot of the times. But realistically, with the supports, with what we can do in our community, with foster families, mentoring and teaming up to be part of that support system for our biological families, it's possible. Reunification is definitely possible in a safe and healthy manner, of course. Some kids wait, over 2 months or about 2 months for a foster family, whether that's because, we have licensed families that aren't taking that age range, if we have a lot of teens on campus or large sibling groups. We know that we need kids to be out of congregate care, and congregate care would be like Child Haven, where kids go right out of their home and they wait there. Our staff is wonderful. They, love children, but we need kids in a family-like setting where it's a consistent caregiver, where it's the same person that they see every day, that they build that trust and relationship with, so that they're able to heal and become, come to a place where they're in a better situation themselves, with mental health and whatever they're dealing with. Obviously coming into foster care is a traumatic event. So we need them in a consistent situation, which would be a family-like setting. Over 55 kids, are waiting at any given time that we have it at Child Haven. It could be less, it could be more. Like, we just learned that with school coming back in person, having our teachers have eyes and ears to see and listen to our children, we know that number, it doubled. 2 out of 3 kids that are removed are under the age of 6. So high number of our kids that need consistent caregivers to, they need everything from our families. And so that is a very vulnerable age group. And then 1 out of 3 of our kids are part of a sibling group. So we always ask families, think about if you have siblings. What if you were placed in different homes? How would you feel? For me personally, when we got licensed, I knew we needed to take siblings. I have siblings, and there's no way I would have ever gone through any situation where I couldn't have been with them, because I need to know that they're okay. And we saw that firsthand when we said yes to our first placement. So, considering taking sibling groups and keeping siblings together is so important for them to heal, for that family unit to come back together, because if they can keep that relationship, we know it's more likely that they'll be in a better situation. A lot of information is in the community that seems to be misleading or false, and so we want to clear that up and just educate, different members of the community. So when people say, well, I don't think I'm able to foster, we can say, yes, you can. So the first one is you do have to at least be 21 years old, but there's no age limit to become a foster parent. We have many grandparents, retirees that love to just, they're like, we're lonely. Nobody's here. All our kids are gone. We need this full house again. So definitely a possibility. You can be married or unmarried. A lot of people always say, well, I'm not married, so I don't think I can. You could be single, male or female. You could be part of the LGBTQ community. You could be disabled. You can rent or own an apartment, condo, single family home, or mobile home. We do have, things that you have to get your home ready to be licensed, but we're not saying you have to have a 5-bedroom home to become a foster parent, right? If you have enough room to give, one child, of course, that's making at least one difference, and that's a lot. We do not care about your immigration status. You do not need to be a legal citizen to become a foster parent. You do have to have some form of reliable transportation, but that does include the bus system, ride sharing, public transportation, different things like that. So those are still, a way to get around, and we're okay with that. When you get, you're in the licensing process, you do attend 8 meetings, and right now we are doing them online. So within the last year, we did switch that over, and we've seen great success with that. So we're able to meet our families, whether they have crazy work schedules or they have kids in the home, and trying to find a babysitter once a week, every single week, sometimes can get challenging. So we've really seen good success with taking our training and moving it to online. So I think we're going to try to continue at least offering some online options for our families. We miss seeing our families in person, but we know that sometimes you have to go through things like this to learn technology, and we're doing it. And then if you are in a coupled relationship, you do have to attend together, because we want families to be on the same page, motivated and ready to take this on together. A lot of our families that we talk to, maybe you're just not ready to become a foster family, and I totally understand. It's a big commitment, and you have to be in the right mindset and space and time of your life where you're like, right now, we're doing it. So these are just some other ways that you can give back or get involved. And I really like to share these ones because, again, not everyone is in a place in their life where foster care is the right time for them. So the first one is honestly just to raise awareness. We have to talk about foster care. It's not going anywhere. The needs of our children are remaining. Our community is growing. Population wise. So we know that there are going to be, higher needs for foster families to step up. You can donate hard goods, clothing, toys, anything like that, new or used, to Peggy's Attic, which is at Child Haven. But we also have worked with another organization that has Hannah's Closet, and they have a north and a south location. So a great way to give back if you're not ready. I know Vicki's going to talk all about Casa, so I will save that for her. You can become a CCSD volunteer educational advocate, where you're helping our families navigate, the school system with, our kids that need that extra support. You can become a sibling preservation services volunteer, and that's with St. Jude's. So of those sibling groups that are separated, large sibling groups that are able to be together, they keep that relationship between those sibling groups. So that's a really great way for our kids to remain in contact. Or you could volunteer at Child Haven. So another great way to give back to our kids and families. So now I have to figure out how to stop sharing and then pass it on to Vicki, which I think I did it. And then,
thank you so much, Haley.
Yeah.
I'm going to put Peggy's Attic in the chat for everybody. And then, do you have Hannah's Closet?
Yeah, I can
awesome.
pull that up. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that would be really great to put Peggy's Attic, because gosh, that's really great. Are they back open all day?
They do have certain times and days, so I'll put the phone number, just call them, because I know they only have certain amount of volunteers that, help out. So I'm not quite sure of their regular schedule.
Okay, perfect.
And Haley, also, if you have the child, you said volunteer at Child Haven, maybe we could have that link or something there.
Definitely.
Too.
And I'm also going to put our Count Me In website, which has tons of information on there where you can, it's kind of like a one-stop shop. So I'll put that on there too.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Haley. Okay, next up we have Vicki. Vicki used to work at the Department of Family Services. We miss her tremendously. However, she is one of the best. She is the best Casa volunteers ever in life. So we are so happy to have you here. Thank you so much, Vicki, and I will mute myself. You're up.
So thank you so much, Michelle. My name is Vicki Wilson, and I've actually worked in child welfare for about 23 years, but I've only been with the Casa program for about 3. Now, Casa stands for Court-Appointed Special Advocate, and sometimes you'll hear people say the term GAL, Guardian Ad Litem. It can be used interchangeably in most jurisdictions. The Casa program started originally in 1977 under the Judge Sue Cupp in Seattle, Washington. When he moved into juvenile hearings, he basically thought that what was missing from the courtroom was that singular voice to be an advocate for the child. Now, here in Clark County, we started our program in 1980 under the Honorable Judge Mendoza, who's no longer with us. Statewide, there are 10 Casa programs in different jurisdictions. We currently operate in 8th Judicial District Court. And we operate under NRS 432B 500, which talks about appointment of a guardian ad litem. Now, here locally, we have exactly 386 volunteers today, of which 319 are females and 97 are males. And the primary role of the Casa volunteer is twofold. One is being well-being, or what I would call normalcy. I think most people that come in to do this role have heard about foster children. Maybe foster parenting isn't quite right for them, or maybe they are a foster parent and they've seen the benefit of having a Casa volunteer, and they say, we want children to have normal childhood experiences. We want someone to have the bandwidth to really think about things that are important to children, or, such as going to camp over the summer, or finding a tutor, or transportation, and they just want to be that support role to make sure that children in foster care have as many normal experiences as possible, and that they're safe, and that the information that one person thinks they're seeing is true for all. And then that second piece is that permanency role. And that's really key and critical for a Casa volunteer, because I think most people come into this because they care about children and want to see the best for them. But the reality is that some children spend far too long in foster care. And as Ms. Haley mentioned, foster care is intended to be a short-term placement solution. Yes, it is very appropriate when children are safe, but I've seen children come into care at the age of 3 and or as newborns and age out of the foster care system. And we're not talking about children that have very big issues where you could honestly see that there would be challenges finding a care provider that could take care of them. It really is just children. And you see sometimes how decisions are made along the lifeline of the case that unfortunately cause the child to just remain in care. Now, how is Casa different from some of the other people? First of all, I believe that most people that work in child welfare care about children. So sometimes when people say, oh, people, so-and-so overlooked this, or people just don't care, the reality is I've met lots of people in 23 years. Many of them, most of them care about children, and they put children first because they came into this field because they wanted to see positive outcomes for children and families. I think the primary difference between a lot of these roles in a Casa volunteer is bandwidth. Casa volunteers typically only represent one child or one sibling group at a time. And so when you talk to maybe a CAP attorney, which stands for Children's Attorney Project, they are there, they are attorneys, and they go to court and they're supposed to represent what their client says they want. So if a 5-year-old says, I want to go home all the time, regardless of whether or not the conditions of the home have changed or whether or not it's safe, the CAP attorney probably should go to court and say, Your Honor, my client says that they would want to go home. And many of them have, I don't think I've met one that has under 100 children. The last couple that I've checked with are representing over 100 children. Casa volunteer has one, and they don't have the legal background, so they don't necessarily have to go to court and say, Your Honor, this is what the child says they want, and write a report entirely about what the child says they want. Casa volunteers can honestly say, yes, this is what the child wants, but it is not in their best interest to return home because the conditions for return have not been met. There have not been any parental modifications as far as that caregiver protective capacity that will lead us to believe that it's safe for the child to be home. But yes, Your Honor, if you ask this 5-year-old, they absolutely say they want to go home all the time. Also with permanency workers and NIA specialists, they obviously represent more than one child at a time. So sometimes the bandwidth that a CASA volunteer brings to the table, they have that bandwidth to make that phone call every day, send an email every single day about one child, one case. They can make a priority that little Johnny doesn't have his baseball shoes for Friday, and they're going to take a team picture, and they need those shoes on Friday. And so I've seen CASA volunteers make the difference between where a child is and where they want to be. And it's a great experience to be able to work with people that can have that singular focus on the well-being of the child and permanency. Now, what does it take to become a CASA volunteer? So there are some similarities to being a foster parent, i.e. you have to be 21 years of age. For obvious reasons, we don't want a CASA volunteer to be 17 years old representing a child who's 17 years old. There's privacy, and we want children to feel comfortable and know that they're talking to an adult. And so you have to be 21. We have background checks. You have to meet whatever requirements. As far as background, you have to meet the same conditions that it would take in order for someone to be an employee for district court. We very much so support our judges. That is our primary role, to do great research, have conversations, courageous conversations, sometimes difficult conversations. As Michelle mentioned earlier, children do go home. And so if there's an in-home safety plan and the case is not closed, CASA volunteers transition with that child. So they will be going in and having conversations with parents and meeting with their child. We try to get CASA volunteers to commit through the life of the case. I've seen CASA volunteers be on a case for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. We prepare CASA volunteers that you should be around, or at least anticipate being around, for at least 2 years, largely because we try to take the more challenging cases. There are over 3,000 children in protective custody and or foster care in Clark County. We have nearly 400 volunteers. We cannot take every case. So we really do try to look for the more challenging cases, whereas permanency might be an issue. Now, or achieving it in a more timely manner may be an issue because it's just very complicated. People say, well, why do you need a CASA volunteer? You have all these great people that love children. Well, you do, but this isn't Law and Order SVU. These issues cannot be resolved in 60 minutes. And if they could, I can guarantee you that every worker would resolve their case within 60 minutes and move on to the next one. A lot of times what our families need does not exist in this community. So what you end up having to do is piecing together a bunch of people, resources, and things that are your best fit for what that family needs at that time. But the reality is that it falls short of what those families need. Sometimes what's in the best interest isn't super clear, because it's complicated. If you have a sibling group of, let's just say, 6 kids with 3 different fathers, and 2 of those fathers say, I want my 2, but I can't do the others, and then all 6 kids are currently separated in 2 separate foster homes between boys and girls, and then mom is doing okay, but she's been taking a while, what is the best answer? Do we leave children in foster care, hoping that someone will want all of them together? Do we allow each father to take their own kids, knowing that that's going to cause a sibling separation? Do we wait on birth mom to get it back together, because it's probably the only chance that all of those children will be together again? You know, it's not simple. It's not without its complexities, and sometimes it's not without heartbreak, even if we're doing the best that we can. And I think that's where CASA volunteers are really important, because we have that singular focus. It's that one child, it's that one sibling group. We can look at the gaps, we can look at the holes, we can go back and research a case for years and say, based on our opinion, this is what we think is in the best interest. And that is exactly what the courtroom is looking for. They're not looking for another legal opinion. There are enough judges and attorneys and in the courtroom. They are not looking for another child welfare expert. We already have that subject matter expert in the courtroom. They're looking for common sense to come into the courtroom and say, you know what, Your Honor, I've spoken to people, I know the kid, I've had lots of conversations, and based on what I've seen, this is what I think is in the best interest of this child. Contrary to popular belief, some people are like, well, this CASA checks in every day, surely they have nothing better to do. Over 50% of our volunteers actually work full-time. There's only a small percentage that are actually retired. So many people find that they can actually fit CASA well within their schedule, because you're not that primary caregiver. You're not that foster parent that has to do homework every day and pick up everyone and get them dressed and get them off to school and make sure there's food on the table. You're not that primary worker that has to check them into hospitals and follow up with birth parents and write multiple court reports that are 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 pages long for one family. you really have such a small role as far as what is required of your time, and that, focus on the child, do great research, ask clarifying questions, and be prepared to go to court and say, Your Honor, this is what I've seen is happening. This is what I think is in their best interest. And this is what I think that permanency goal should look like for the next 6 months. Permanency review hearings typically happen every 6 months or so. So a CASA volunteer is required to do a report every 6 months. Our court reports, if you look at them in comparison to the Department of Family Services, are typically very short. They can easily be, our reports are typically maybe 3 pages long if it's a new case, especially if there's only one kiddo. If it's a larger sibling group, maybe 3 or 4 pages long. But also our number of contacts tends to be a little bit different. When you look at the number of contacts for CASA volunteers, easily they've had 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 contacts within a 6-month period. And that's largely because they're just working one case. So a CASA volunteer may have to follow up with 20, 30, 40 people, depending on how many people are on the child's team, as well as sometimes there are changes and transitions. Sometimes workers change, sometimes judges change, depending on circumstances. And so we really try to be that singular one voice that stays with the child from beginning to end. We are not allowed, as CASA volunteers, we're not allowed to bring children into our home. This is really a professional relationship for the benefit of the court so that they can have a second opinion in the courtroom when it comes to well-being and permanency. So we offer orientation once a week. It's virtual. We offer training virtual as well, although I do believe we're going back to in-person in July. We meet once a month as a group. We go out and have dinner, and we try to do very cool things. The last group outing that they let me plan was to Price is Right. We had a great time. We came on down and spent the day in California. But it's you learn a lot. As Michelle said earlier, there's some terrible stories that our children can tell. But with a CASA volunteer bringing their voice to the courtroom, hopefully there'll be some permanency in a much shorter time frame with CASA volunteers being involved.
Thank you so much, Vicki. So amazing. That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We love our CASAs. I'm like, can we get a CASA? Please, can you just give the kids a CASA? Because I don't know where I would be without CASAs. My mom's a CASA also. Anyway, we just love CASA. Okay, and so our last speaker is our merged sister also, Kendra. And Kendra is joining us from, Kendra, are you in Reno right now? In Carson City?
Yeah.
Where are you? Okay, I can't find you. Hold on, I'm still scrolling. Okay, there you are. And Kendra is going to introduce and tell you how many CASA boards she's on and what she does with the CASA program as well. Thanks, Kendra. Go ahead.
Thank you, Michelle. My name is Kendra Birchie, and I am actually a deputy public defender at the Washoe County Public Defender's Office. So I represent those who are accused of crimes to make sure that everyone has a voice in the courtroom on the criminal side. I actually started my journey into the law by being a CASA volunteer through college. So I was able to be on cases, advocating in the courtroom, and just fell in love with the CASA program, and they couldn't get rid of me. So I ended up volunteering and then working for a family court judge who only did the dependency cases, so oversaw all of the foster care cases. I then went to work for Washoe Legal Services, where I was one of those CAP attorneys, the child advocate, representing kids in the courtroom. And then when I had my calling to go over to the public defender's office, I needed to find a way to continue advocating for children in the foster care system. So I joined the Washoe CASA Foundation, which is the nonprofit board that helps out and assists our local CASA program. And I was the board chair for 2 years, and I'm a board member right now. So I think that Vicki did an absolutely amazing overview of what a CASA is. I have a little PowerPoint, but I'll skim through it if you guys don't mind, just because she did such a great job of explaining kind of the really important aspects of being a CASA and why, even if there is an attorney representing the child, there's an attorney representing the parent, there's an attorney representing the other parent and the social worker, why it's important to still have that CASA voice. And I think you should be able to see my screen. Can you guys see that presentation? Perfect. So as right now our kind of saying is change a child's story, because that's what we really feel that CASAs do. The statistics show that children are more likely to be successful if there is a child involved in a case. So Vicki discussed what CASA is, court-appointed special advocate. They are normal, everyday citizens who are appointed by a judge to take a look at the case, talk to social workers, talk to the family, talk to the teachers, and find out what's really going on. But more importantly, you're there for the child. You're not a mentor, but you get to have this really important relationship with the child and then advocate for them in family court proceedings. Not many people are familiar with all the challenges that are faced by those who are in the child welfare system. I think as we've heard from the different speakers, our world changed literally overnight if a child is taken from their family. Hopefully, as we discussed, they're placed with relatives, but sometimes that's just not possible. So what is the goal of a Casa volunteer? I think you've heard from several of the members, and I'm so heartened to hear that from all of those who are involved in the foster care system, that the first goal is to see if there's a way to safely bring that child home, to provide services, to provide resources, to help them to be successful in their home. Because that's what studies say, is that studies say that if children are able to be reunified with their parents, they are more likely to succeed. They're more likely to not enter into the juvenile justice system. And more importantly, less likely to enter into the criminal justice system, which I think that is absolutely the hope for everyone, is to have these positive outcomes for our children. So we have been involved in the community here in Reno since 1982. We are part of the 2nd Judicial District Court, where the judges who are involved in the dependency cases and also some divorce and custody cases will ask for a Casa to be appointed to take a look and give that high-end overview of what's really going on in that child's life. We are actually in 49 states, the Casa programs, and that's all except for, I think, North Dakota. So this is what Vicki was discussing about, of kind of what the difference is with a Casa's being a best interest advocate. Again, we're not advocating for the child's wishes. Sometimes the Casa will be requesting things that are against their wishes. And I've always appreciated when the Casa puts in the report and says, hey, this is what the child wants. This is what they need. And this is why I think they need something that's a little different, or, there needs to be more time before the child should have those unsupervised visits. So you learn about the child because you speak to the child directly, you watch the visits, you speak to the parents, you speak to all the other stakeholders to find out what's going on. You get to engage with a child regularly. As a child attorney, as a CAP attorney, I can say this is one of the biggest things of why I hated being a CAP attorney, is because I didn't have that time to really engage with the children. You get to recommend what might be best for the child. And this is what's important, is it doesn't have to be whether or not the child should return home. Recommendations can be things like, this child should play sports. I can say, as a attorney, I was so frustrated where I had a case with a young boy who absolutely needed a male role model like nothing other. I think that would have helped him so tremendously. It impacted everything because he had no male role model. He had a lot of active energy and didn't know what to do with it. So I had been advocating for, at that time, over a year to get this youth involved in sports. And finally, we got a Casa in the case, and the Casa put in his recommendations that the child should attend a soccer camp. He did, and he ended up getting straight A's the next year and was placed in an adoptive home and is now been adopted and is excelling and is just doing wonderful. And I really do think a lot of it was because we were finally able to get that kid into sports due to their Casa volunteer. That was nothing to do with me being the attorney asking for it. So I think that's really important. So you collaborate with everyone. And then again, you get to be in the court to then also argue with your case manager as to what is in that child's best interest. So here are some of the statistics as to why it is so incredibly crucial for a child to have a Casa volunteer. The main thing for me is they spend on average 7.5 months less in the foster care system just by having that Casa. And I don't know if it's because they have access to more resources or if it's that additional eyes and ears in the system trying to help figure out what's going on. But those are what the statistics show. They also experience fewer out-of-home placements. And what that means is that they have less time. Unfortunately, kids sometimes bounce from foster home to foster home just based on the needs of the foster homes. And so studies have shown that that happens less often. And each time a child is removed, that causes potentially post-traumatic stress disorder. So that is really helpful when you're not having those additional placements. They do better in school. And they have more access to services, like I said, to sometimes the after school programs like soccer programs or tutors and things like that. And more importantly, if a child is reunified with their parent, our studies show that more than 90% of children that volunteers do not re-enter the child welfare system. So they are proven to have better outcomes. So again, here are kind of some of the stats again, just because it is so crucial to be working on what we can to get our kids to excel. So in Washoe County right now, we need Casa volunteers. We have around 750, between 780 children in the foster care system. As of April, it was 802. Due to COVID, we unfortunately had a lot of volunteers who were not able to continue on with their program. So right now for those 802 children, we only have 69 active volunteers. So we are in great need of more volunteers. So if you know anyone who is interested in helping create better outcomes for our children, please let me know. We have the same right now, all of our, we call them Coffee with Casas. Those are our informal informational sessions. Our next one is going to be on June 10th at 10 a.m. They're all done online. So I'll send the link and you just sign up through our Facebook page and show up. And we'd love to talk to you about how you can become a volunteer or how one of your friends can become a volunteer. So we, like I said, just really need people in order to make sure that we are able to provide our children with the Casa, because as Vicki said, one of the best parts about being a Casa is you work with everyone, but you get to be that one consistent person in the child's life. I think that the way that it's done in Vegas is the same way in Washoe County, where unfortunately we have social workers who specialize in certain parts of where the child is, depending on where they're involved in the foster care system. And so sometimes they can get really connected to their social worker and then unfortunately have to transition to another social worker. And so the joy of being a Casa is you get to stay with them and you get to help them navigate that entire system. So the goal is to have one Casa for each child throughout the pendency of their case. And we also have the same request of that you be a volunteer for at least 2 years. So just here's some stories. Like I said, if I gave you my example of the case that I was involved with where the child then was able to play sports, but we found that kids are able to then help stay with their siblings. Just some of the important things of just having a child know that there's somebody there for them that they can trust is really important. So these are the different ways that you can become involved. And I know we are running out of time, so I'll definitely send this in the chat as well. Here's our information, and I really hope that you all consider being a Casa. Again, you do not have to be an attorney. I actually say it's probably better if you're not an attorney, because you get to bring your own life experiences outside of I don't care about the law. That's not your role as a Casa. Your role is to get to know that child and then be the eyes and ears of the court to present that information so that when the court is looking at a case and looking at a child, they're not just looking at the paper in front of them of the report. They're getting to really get to know that child, get to know what they like, what they dislike, and who they are as a human being. So thank you, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. Okay, Jerry, go ahead. I can't. That was so wonderful, everybody. Okay, go ahead, Jerry. I saw you on mute.
Well, I'm just speechless from all the people who care so much about children in the community, and we do have plenty of time for questions. I don't know if Eva can help maybe look in the chat if there's some things we need to read. Are you there, Eva?
Yes, I'm here and I'm looking.
I know we have quite a bit from going back, but I think there was somebody that had a question for later that Michelle had said something about. So
I think Lenora asked about when you have a name change with a kiddo and what paperwork they need to carry. Lenora, can you help me? Was that right?
Yeah. Well, this is the situation. I heard this last week from my brother. This is my niece's boyfriend. They decided to move to, they're both going to, my niece was going to Utah for school and he, I guess, moved there. He grew up in foster care and he managed to get adopted, which is great. But And being young, he ended up getting pulled over for some traffic thing. And because his name in the system does not match his driver's license, he's been sitting in jail as of last week for a week. And everybody's running around right now looking for paperwork or whatever to, help get him out. So what should
This here?
This is in Nevada. He was adopted in California.
Hey,
But,
Lenore,
I mean,
maybe
maybe
you can call me tomorrow. But okay, go
I was
ahead.
gonna say,
Kendra.
can I take this one? The criminal
Yeah, I was gonna
defense
say, but
attorney?
because I would have gotten the information for you like right now on my computer and sent it to you. But if it's California, go ahead.
Well, it was just a question about what paperwork or whatever they should be carrying, or I don't know what they do.
And I was just going to say, Lenore, if you want to talk to me offline, I'm happy to help you navigate that system, just because there's a lot that their criminal defense attorney can and should do, and I can help you with that. So I'll put my work email in the chat right now, and my number. So please feel free to call me, because that's really important, because they can request a name change here if they don't have access to that, and I can help them with that.
Well, he already has the name changed, but they're saying that, because he's gotten like an alias, they're like wondering, well, why? Just saying that I got adopted apparently isn't working. So,
He needs the order. Okay.
oh, is that what? But should they be carrying something? That's what I'm saying. Asking. No.
No, and I'll explain to you offline as to what they're doing there.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, we got it, Ken. Yeah.
I did see that Jody had a question earlier. It says, question for later. When I was with DHHS many years ago, they were providing grants to family resource centers for differential response for the type of cases Robin's talking about, and that are based on educational neglect, inappropriate homes. Does that program still exist?
Robin, that's your P3. Go.
And I saw that the family resource centers, we do still have those out there. Right now we're using the harbor for certain things to help with people. So people can reach out to them. They now have currently 3 centers that people can go to get assistance from. So that is one of the places that people can go when they're trying to get assistance with when their kids are having DJJS, mental health. They're all under the umbrella at the harbor, so they can get that service there.
And I have a question. Michelle, you mentioned that there was volunteer opportunities. I think it was you, Michelle. Somebody mentioned Child Haven. Was it Robin?
I'm sorry, and she said differential response. So we do still use DR. We use differential response, and that is for educational neglect. They are overwhelmed with our education right now, so we don't have any room for them right now.
I was just curious what type of volunteers they needed at Child Haven. What can people do to help?
Sure. So a lot of times, and I think Sarah had her hand raised too. Okay, good. Sarah, yes, we'll get to you next. A lot of times Peggy's Attic needs volunteers for all of the donations that come in, folding clothes. We get a lot of clothes, especially during summer and winter and the switchover. So that definitely. And then Child Haven Campus, right now, because of COVID, I don't think we're accepting volunteers right this moment. But as soon as everything gets back open, I'll let you know. We used to have, okay, a lot of times we have volunteers come in and hold babies. I know that sounds crazy, but that's the truth. Because we are down a lot of workers because of 1, the budget, and 2, the budget, and then 3, the budget. So because of that, we have to have people that will help us at our Child Haven campus. But you do have to get background checked and fingerprinted, but it's really to hold the babies. We have a lot of kids 0 to 5 years old that are in the Agassiz Cottage that really need extra love and attention. And so that would be a baby holder. And it's a fantastic job. But I want to hold everybody. So we definitely love it when people come and volunteer. Yes.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. So
and I'll let you know as soon as it opens.
Yeah, it's just so amazing to hear how much all of you care, and it's very touching. Sarah, you had a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Jerry. So about 10 days ago, I received a photo of an 8-year-old girl right outside UNLV. She was handcuffed behind her back and placed on the curb, and she was with Metro. And I was wondering, when a phone call comes in regarding a juvenile, how quickly, since you are essential and you are definitely first responders, how quickly does it come into your office that there's a juvenile in custody or potentially being taken into custody?
Immediately. We're probably there within, it depends. Most of the time when we get calls, and Robin will tell you, intake, they call us to come to the scene. If it's over the age of 8, Robin, you can take that one. If it's over the age of 8, if it's under the age of 5, we have our on-call workers for our specialized units that go right to the scene. Metro calls us. Metro calls us to come out for child homicides. Metro calls us to come out for neo fatalities. We're there within 45 minutes or less. Like really, if it's between the hours of like midnight and 6 in the morning, 20 minutes. Our workers have cars at home and they respond immediately. For those cases with the kids on, for juvenile detention, we go just in case there's somebody else that can come and take the child, depending on where the parents are. Juvenile justice is our sister agency. So a lot of times if the kids are transported to JJ and they find out, okay, there's not going to be a hearing, or we can let them go over to Child Haven campus and wait for parents to pick them up. Sometimes they do that too. It's not always the best placement for kids to be on Child Haven campus. We'd rather parents come pick them up right from juvenile justice. But we are there. Robin, do you have anything for that, or Ken?
I see now that we kind of changed it. Before, when we didn't have a parent to come pick a child up for JJ, because we do have those kids who their behavior is out of control and their parents like they can't come home. It used to be considered a priority one to get the child out of the detention center, but now they've kind of pushed it back to a P3, so that we can try to identify and talk to that parent and see if that parent would be willing to take that child home, instead of us rushing over to Child Haven to DJJS to put them in Child Haven until we can talk to that parent. So they have changed the response time for that.
And Sarah, that's a good thing, because we do not want kids on Child Haven campus. We want them at home with their parents as of yesterday. We really want the kids to stay home.
And I'm just really impressed with how much that is the case, where you want them to be in the home and you do everything you can. So it's amazing. So Michelle,
Parents do better when kids are in the home too. It's about parents too. Yeah.
I can't imagine.
I think that people tend to look at Child Haven in the wrong kind, or not Child Haven, but child welfare in the wrong way, at least in Nevada. I can't speak for the other states, but for Nevada, we really try to keep kids at home. I work, even when I was a permanency supervisor, what Michelle did, my goal was always to get kids home. That is always our goal. Like, even to the fat lady sings, I'm talking about, I used to work those cases until the judge signed the order and said that those rights were terminated, because I do believe that the best place for children to be is at home safely if they can be.
We want to touch on something real quick though, because I know that everybody watches TV and the news, and I know there's been a lot of stories on Netflix and those kinds of programs where you hear these horrific stories about children who, were in the hands of child welfare workers or teachers or educators who, are now deceased. And it's very sad. It's a horrible situation, but I can tell you that we do care about kids. And like Robin said, I think there's a misconceived notion that we're baby snatchers and we want to just put kids in different placements, but we really want kids to be home when it's safe. And we will never leave a kid in a home where it's not safe. We don't sleep at night. So we would never do that to a child and leave them in an unsafe situation. So just because I think that a lot of the light has been shining on us in a different light. So just to let you know, like in the state of Nevada here, we don't play with that at all. We want kids to be safe, and we will make sure they're safe with or without family or with family. So I just want to make sure that everybody knew that too.
I think Giovanni had a question.
Well, it's not so much a question as much as it's a comment. I just wanted to say that the way that we do child welfare now with our current safety model of SIPs is so much more family focused, and it really helps with the recidivism of children coming back into care. And so when you're not doing a checklist, just kind of compliance, checking off those boxes, you're really working in collaboration with the families to get to the core of what the issue is. I can say, as someone who used to work under Robin's supervision, when I first came into child welfare as a permanency worker, we really do think outside of the box. How can we bring additional family members and to, help with the permanency of a child. It is so important. I think it's safe to say that we work extremely hard to be creative with how we can keep a child with their family of origin in a safe space. And SIPS really does allow us to be able to do that and really work with families so that children are not just kind of repeating a cycle. And it's important to think about the behavioral changes and for everyone to be understanding of what that means. So it's important for judges to understand the SIPS process, for attorneys, both our DAs, both our special public defenders, our CAP attorneys, everyone to really understand, our Casa workers, to understand what that SIPS process looks like. The conditions for return are incredibly important because those are what allow us to place a child back in the home on an in-home safety plan while a parent is still working that safety plan. And I think it was Michelle that had mentioned when kids are with their families, it helps the parents, to do better. They want to keep their kids in the home. And so that's one of the things that I think Nevada does so well, is that we are really focused on behavioral change and partnering with families to help keep them together. We really don't want to take kids out of the home, and we work extremely hard to make sure that we can keep them in home. And if we have to take them out, working exceptionally hard to get them back in the home as quickly as safely possible.
I think Michelle, we're going to answer a question.
Yeah, so for our runaways, a lot of times we have children that run away from different states to Nevada. I'll tell you that a lot of those kids are sexually trafficked. We have a specialized unit called ARIS, At-Risk Youth Services. A lot of those children who run away are female children who are trafficked from state to state to state, and sometimes they end up leaving their abuser and getting away and coming to Nevada. We have a specialized unit that, my unit too, that deals with and helps mentor and take care of our babies that have been sexually trafficked. If there's a child that came from California that comes back here, we call parents and say, do you know where your children are? I'm sure they do. We work with the other state. We try to get the kids home. We give bus packets to parents from the other state to come here. And Robin will tell you, we want kids home. So if a parent is like, my kid's been missing for 3 weeks, they end up in Nevada. Can you come here tomorrow? We're putting you on a plane to come get your baby. So that is what we're doing to get kids back. And if we have kids here that go to another state, it's the same thing. That state will call us. Our workers will fly out there to get kids. We've had parents take their kids and leave the state and go to Florida or wherever. We have had to follow and do that as well. I hope that answers your question. Kendra.
Can I just add, because this is actually something that's going through the legislative session right now, and I was trying to pull up the bill number because I can't remember it off the top of my head, but Senator Ratty has a bill also to make sure that for those kids, we're not just arresting them and bringing them to up north would be Jan Evans, but we're trying to create what I think they're calling a receiving center. So to have some other option. So for those kids, we aren't just arresting them unless that bill is passed and they push it out more. Officers only have until 2022 to still have that ability to arrest. Which I'll just say as a public defender and then having been an attorney, I don't think that it is appropriate for our officers to be arresting these runaways. And so I'm really grateful that we're building, and hopefully it'll get out of, I think it's in finance or something like that. That this law will come into effect where we're able to create those structures so that those kids do have a safe place to be able to go while they're waiting for a parent or while somebody else is investigating the situation, rather than have that child be detained. Because I'm sure as everyone on this call that I can see at least will agree, that having a child be placed in handcuffs and having them then be arrested and go through that process is incredibly traumatizing, and it destroys the trust that we want to help create and build to be able to then provide them with the services that they need to be successful.
And Sandra dropped the bill. She says it's SB 274. She has the link there in the chat.
Yeah, I will be testifying on that whenever it's time, because that is, child and handcuffs shouldn't even be in the same sentence.
So Michelle, let us know, because we can testify, for Nevada Now, or put in Yeah.
Yeah.
In our opinion. So, well, do you want to wrap us up? We could go on.
No, go ahead.
Well, no, you said from the beginning we could talk about this. And,
yeah.
I'm thinking of other things we need to, have programs on. One of the things we worked on before the pandemic, we had a lot of programs on child sex trafficking. And when you were talking
Yes.
about that, you and I'll talk more about that. That would be something to go back to and see how it's going, through the pandemic. I'm sure that's some of the notes I was making is, I know parents have had trouble with, educating our kids. And
Yes.
and one of the things you're watching for is if children are getting the right education and getting housing and food, and that's become more difficult for people. So
yeah.
Anyway, we could talk about this for a while. We so appreciate you all. What wonderful speakers, and Robin taking time on her vacation to come and speak with us. And we're just so appreciative. We've learned so much, and just the care and that I hear in your voices for children is just so touching. And we appreciate you, Michelle, for helping us put these programs together and helps us learn too. So. And we've recorded it. We'll let you know about the link, and we'll make sure to share the volunteer opportunities for people and how to be a Casa volunteer. And we just so appreciate you taking the time this afternoon to talk with us. So thank you so much.